Welcome back to the Hattie for Horrors podcast, where we review horror movies and horror franchises. I'm Mark,
And I'm Dead-Eye.
and today we are back reviewing another movie based off a horror video game. This time we're reviewing Corpse Party, released in 2015, directed by Yamada and rated by Yoshimasa. Deadeye, can you please give people the plot summary?
Facing goodbyes and graduation, Naomi Nakashima, her childhood friend Satoshi Mochida, and their classmates are clearing up after their last ever cultural festival, when horror buff class representative Ayumi Shinozaki decides to perform Sachiko Ever After, so they will stay friends forever. Instead, they were whisked away to a haunted graduation ceremony for Heavenly Host Elementary School, forced to close after a series of gruesome murders. What fate awaits Naomi and her friends at the cursed school?
Now, as I was telling you before we hit record on the podcast, is that this movie just started out the gate with things happening, and I'm used to like a slow introductory build, but like this movie just like kickstarted out the gate, and I was not prepared for that. But what about you? What are your overall thoughts on Corpse Party? Did you play the video game?
I watched it probably a couple different times, and there's different playthroughs because it's sort of a choose your own adventure type of a game. So there's a lot of different endings you can get. But I'm familiar with some of the different endings, and luckily familiar with a lot of the characters. I agree. It's even being familiar with it. It's hard to like who's who and what's going on at first. And they also a big thing is they use first names, last names, nicknames kind of interchangeably, and you're not really introduced to all these different characters and the variety of names you can use for them. So yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying there.
What are your thoughts on the movie overall?
Overall, let's see. Well, I would say for the first around half of the movie, especially on the first watch, I kind of couldn't believe what was going on in front of me. I think in the last half of the movie, they bring it back around quite a bit. But for the first half, the first kill, so we're sort of introduced to the movie with this falling into a pit. Or like the charm, they do this sort of charm, pull apart a piece of paper, and then fall into this pit. The animation for it's a little bit wonky. You can kind of tell that they're trying to shake the room by just shaking around the camera. They're trying to like make parts of the room appear shaky by like shaking them physically with the camera also shaking. So it's a little messy at first, and then the first kill is also really messy. Really, like it's not very believable. And so watching at that point, I was pretty worried about where it was going to go. But I would say it picks back up maybe halfway or almost halfway through the movie. I think as a fan of the overall story and everything, that I'm glad that it exists because it's good to have more stuff out there. But I think if you weren't a fan of it, I think it'd be a little bit harder of a sell. You'd have to really like horror and the style. I'm not sure. So yeah, a little bit up and down.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same. Being new to this, I did watch a couple of walkthroughs. Um, But I just felt like I was missing something. I felt like just the movie moved so fast and kind of just like threw you into it that I felt that I was missing details or that I didn't understand something because I was being left out. I feel like this is a movie that's definitely catered to people who've played the game and who knows the lore.
Right. I think they came into kind of a unique problem. Normally, for almost any piece of media, you have sort of a main character and maybe some side characters. The issue with Corpse Party is it's meant to be played with tons of different perspectives at different points. So there are, I think, something like 8 main characters, you could call them. And that doesn't help anybody in an hour and a half long movie because the game itself you have to like it takes at least 10 hours to play through the game, and so you get to see it at the beginning. It's all these people. It's kind of crowded. You don't really fully process who everyone is, but then you start to play as each individual set of characters and kind of piece that together as you go. I was kind of shocked, yeah, watching the movie, the amount that you were kind of supposed to keep balanced, you're supposed to keep track of without almost any introduction, considering we have that many important characters. And it's not just the people on our side. There's also like enemy characters. A lot of the time, like if you've got Friday the 13th or any of these standard horror movies, there is a main enemy character, maybe another like hidden enemy character or a different threat. But for the most part, you've got one core enemy, and there are a few different major enemy characters in this movie as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I I think I was kind of torn, especially because I'm a fan of the game, I was kind of torn on how to feel about the fact that they really did have pretty much everything from the game. Like every character is included pretty much, not entirely, it's like one or two characters, but for the most part, they got everybody. Um, like going into it, there's a janitor character that follows these guys around. They're the first kill, whatever. There's Sachiko, some ghost kids, Sachiko's mom. Like you have all these different kind of threats, and I think as it was going along, I was like, okay, they'll probably not do this part, and I'm okay with that, even though I'd like to see it used in the movie. And then there it is, the ghost kids, their tongues, like any of these elements that I liked in the games. I see them in there, but then it's like you've got the amount of time you're actually given to appreciate them is so short. It's probably going to be a theme throughout the rest of the conversation of the movie, is that things felt rushed, and that there's a lot packed into a short time. But it's not like the whole movie was bad or anything. There are elements or there are areas in the movie that I was actually like pretty impressed by. It's just sort of, especially the first half, is really overshadowed by just how much they're trying to pack in.
Yeah, that first half of the movie was just it was nonstop once the movie started. And then like that second half it slowed down,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I feel like it hurt the movie
Mhm.
because since the first half was so slow, you're meeting the characters, you're being introduced to the setting, you're being introduced to the villains, you're being introduced to the lore and the connections. It's going by so fast that when it starts to slow down, it's like, okay, people are dying, things are happening, but now you're trying to build character and build moments,
Mhm.
but that only really works if I was able to catch all the big details in the first half, which I personally wasn't able to.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think like for the first little while here, we'll talk about almost entirely like just try to focus as much on the movie as possible. But there are also differences that I will get into later, between the movie and the game. But I figure we wait on that in case people are mostly focused on the movie, whatever. Um, I I think let's see with the movie, where was I going to go with this? There were Oh yeah, there's a scene in terms of like actually a decent scene, because obviously we're talking a lot about the rushing of the movie. There are some scenes that I think are good, particularly around one of them was like Naomi, kind of the main-ish character of the movie, or at least the main girl. Naomi, there's a point where she's trapped in a hospital room, and she can't like I'm pretty sure the situation is that she's tripped, she's hurt her ankle, and her friend Seiko has brought her into this room, and she's sort of laying on the bed, and she's asleep, and then she wakes up, and there's someone on the other side of this cloth writing in a journal, or like I think the journal is like being written in automatically or something. It's like a ghost holding a pen or something. And I remember in that scene, like she crawls over and she's next to this journal being written in, and I'm pretty sure the biggest thing about it was the tough thing is I watched the game, and there's a really cool scene that happens there in the game, so I was kind of primed for it. But yeah, she's like sitting in there, and this is I think one of the first times we get to see ghost children or any like ghosts or zombies or creatures of any kind. And after she runs away from there, she runs into Seiko, and we get this weird conversation between the two of them where she's mad at Seiko for leaving her in that room, and then Seiko like runs off, kind of starting us in the direction of Seiko's death and ultimately like Naomi being the one who killed her or whatever. There's all these like I think there's something to the movie that I'm a little worried that people who didn't play the game wouldn't really catch or really understand, especially on first watch through, which is that people in the school they have this thing called the darkening, is what it's described as in the game anyway, which is where they get like manipulated by their environment and they're not aware of their actions that they're taking. And so there's some of that that's going on where Seiko dies, and then later on we realize that Naomi's like involved there. But there's like a couple different points where that happens. Some of which were only exclusive to the movie. Did you follow that well, or like were you like I think that's like a big part that
It was something that
like
I
do you
had
remember that part?
to like rewatch like a few times because
Yeah,
I was just like I'm missing something. But I will say there like
yeah,
from the scenes there were some good jump scares. Some were like very telegraphed. Like one that stood out for me is
yeah.
when they were all in the classroom or they're in that room like towards the beginning and The one girl goes to like walk out to like take a peep out into the hallway. I was like, oh, there's a jump scare
Mm.
coming because she like
Oh,
slowly peeks her head out of
yeah.
the hallway, and then a ghost appears, and I was like, oh my god. But then she gets an axe to her head, which I was not expecting.
Yeah,
I was not expecting that. I
yeah.
was taken out by that.
That was crazy. Oh, that part's so it's crazy and like I don't know. I guess for that part, maybe I should mention because so this is the very beginning. This is the very like pretty much the beginning of the movie. They fall through the pit and now they're in this mysterious place. They're all together in this mysterious place, and that's actually the teacher, which I'm sure you probably didn't pick up on because how in the heck would you? Because it's not like really indicated very well. But that's like their teacher, which is why she goes out in the hallway to check because they're all kids and they're all supposed to be nervous, which I could see that being a good setup because we could see like we could establish if they had just established her as being like this guardian or protector, then her dying would mean now there's this danger. And it's not just that someone's been killed; it's that their teacher has been killed, which means they're like you're kind of destroying the leader, right? Like that could make a lot of sense, except I don't know that anybody would have followed that she was the
Until you
teacher.
said
She
it
doesn't really
right
look older than
now,
them
I
particularly.
had no idea she was their teacher.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. Ugh. But yeah, that kill, the frustrating side of that kill for me as like a game watcher, whatever, is in the game when they fall through the pit, they're all separated instead of being all in one room together. And the teacher, I believe, is alone. So the teacher falls through alone. She is the first kill that we get to experience in the game and establishes the danger of where we are. But it's a cool part of the game that because they're not together, we as an audience can be aware of the danger that the characters themselves aren't. And like that's a thing that they play with in the game. So like that character, the teacher character, allows us to establish a ton in the game in that wherever they land, they start seeing ghosts and talking to ghosts, and the ghosts are either warning them or angry with them or whatever. And the teacher is like ultimately the teacher is committing to I'm going to go find these kids, and some of the ghosts are children, and so these children are like they're mad because they think the teacher isn't going to actually help them because they probably died hoping someone would save them, and they're like, no, you don't even care about those kids. You just want to get out of here yourself. You know, we don't trust you, whatever. And then ultimately the teacher like something falls on top of her, or a ghost pushes something and it falls on top of her, and she's like laying there dying, and the ghost is like, I like you don't care, and she's like, I do care. I need to keep moving. I need to stay alive because these kids are in danger and the ghost kind of changes. The ghost is initially red and angry, changes into like this kind of blue ghost, and is like, "Oh, you do care. I mean, that's really sad, basically, because you're gonna die here with us." Something along those lines. And like that whole establishment is like now we know there's ghosts. Now we know they can be angry or they can be kind, and like we were establishing all these different ideas, but we're doing it all with a character that's going to die anyway. So we don't like we know that that's not going to impact the rest of the character's understanding of where they are. And yeah, that's that whole situation. Instead, playing it out where you just have all these kids and the teacher all in the same room, landing together. The teacher then gets killed, and that's it. But I like it's a bummer. It's okay because the teacher had to die early, and it's an hour and a half long of a movie, and you know, like I can write off some of that, but it is a little frustrating to look at the differences there. Um, but and the kill, it also doesn't help that the kill is like so she gets axed in the head and then she falls down to the floor and the shot of her when she dies in that situation, it like it's I think practical effects or whatever, her head doesn't look real. It doesn't look convincing at all. And so that was a little bit of a bummer too. So I think that to me is the worst kill. There are much better kills in the movie. It's you know that but that one is tough. Um, I guess it's maybe a fine introduction to the danger of the school, though, and that's where I meet the janitor, so that's at least something. And that also causes everyone to run and get separated, which is maybe good. But also, like even watching that part, they separate out. I don't know why they separate out. Like there's only one doorway that the thing is in, so we're going up the other doorway. Why would we all separate? Why wouldn't we just all run together? Um, but you know,
Yeah,
it
I
is what it
noticed
is.
that.
Uh,
I noticed that they all like
yeah,
ran out together, but then like went their own different ways, and just like why? And also like why would you want to be
yeah,
separated when you just watch your teacher get her like just get murdered with an
yeah.
axe? So you're gonna go venture out and like
Mhm.
by yourself or in like a group of two when you should just stick together to be safe?
Yeah, like there are times where I think, especially because maybe it's just because I watch the game, whatever. But there are times where I look at it and I'm like, I feel like I'm aware of why they did the thing, and I'm like, I like in this case, for example, I think a good argument for why they would have had everyone separate there is because if we all fall in separately like they did in the game, then the audience will be like super confused because it's like, okay, we're here now we're here. What's going on? Like to try to get some universal spot that everybody
But
is.
no, see,
Because there's so many characters, but like you can't
you
fix that.
you can fix that by
Mm,
starting slow. Like if you spent the first
mm,
15 to 20 minutes introducing the characters and their dynamics and their relationships to each other, then once they're dropped into the
mm.
pit and they're separated, and there's
Yeah, an extra
yeah,
half an
and
hour
if they're separated
so
and
good for
you're
the
and
movie.
then it starts off the same way the game does, where the teacher's killed and no one knows. Then for us, we know that there's danger
Mm,
there as they're trying to find each other and slowly
mm.
piece everything together. It would have helped
Would have been
more.
nice.
I mean, because I there's a Friday the Third, not a Friday. There's a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that does that kind of where you meet all the main kids and then they are dropped into the dream world with Freddy, and they're all separated
Mm,
in their own dreams, having their
mm,
own experience with Freddy, but they can also try to find each other to like band together in the dream. And you raise the stakes by giving us time with the characters. Like, no, don't give me 40 minutes
mm.
of character development. Just give me like 15 to 20.
Sure.
That,
Yeah, I agree.
that's yeah.
I think that's the like it feels like they must because it's about an hour and a half, like almost on the dot if you count the edits and everything. And so it makes me feel like they had exactly this much time to tell a story and also like the order that they shot the story in. Like I wonder if they were like, okay, we know we have to fit this much in, so we're going to speed up the beginning so we can have like more time to spend on the end because the end isn't it's not too bad. Like there's parts in the ending where I was like, okay, I'm back on track. Where early on I was very much ready to just be like, oh no, like this whole thing is going to be a disaster. Which makes me feel like they've spent more time on the ending and more focus on the ending, and the rush from the beginning was to maybe to give them that much time. But it's like, and I don't know what the rules are like. Like why only have an hour and a half long for a 10 hour like because an extra half an hour, 15 minutes of say introduction and getting to know characters, and an extra 15 minutes for the first half of the movie or the first quarter, whatever it is, where it's just so rushed to give us some time to get to know everybody. And there's a few scenes in there too where I feel like the movie is very much pulling from the game. There's I think everything that's in the movie is in the game, but not everything in the game is in the movie. It's kind of the route they took. So like there's a lot of things, and all of them are from the game, but they just didn't have time to do some of the cooler things in that existed. So like here's probably the biggest example, and I think for me the best kill would have to be the one from I think Mayu or whatever for the girl that gets like thrown into the wall. That kill was crazy. It starts off kind of bad because it's I think Kishinuma and Ayumi, which are like Ayumi's the girl that brings the Sachiko charm whatever with her, and they all tear it up, and she's like a paranormal person, whatever. She's like obsessed with paranormal stuff. And then Kishinuma's the blonde guy that's protective of her and wanders the halls with her, and ultimately I think fights the ghoul or whatever he is, the janitor. Um, so they go into this classroom and they see Mayu in there, and she's talking to these little kids, but the little kids don't have one of them doesn't have a jaw and the other one just doesn't have a tongue or something. And so they try to like convince her, hey, you got to get away from these kids. And then once they actually like approach, because she's like, no, they just want someone to talk to. They're just really lonely. When they approach, Kishinuma, the guy, tries to grab Mayu and pull her away from these ghost kids. And one of the ghost kids like looks at him and makes this ridiculous sound, and he gets like flung over to the wall, which wasn't a great start to where this is going to head, but it's okay. And then, but then like the from there, the ghost kids grab Mayu and they pull her with them, and ultimately like drag her down a hallway, and she like explodes into a wall at the end of the hallway, which establishes them as being super dangerous. And I did like after they do that, Kishinuma and Ayumi, the two students that went to try to save her, they go out into the hallway, and the kids are at the end of the hallway just staring over at them, and they run away, which is it's kind of good, like like we're establishing how dangerous and how powerful these kids are. Um, and that whole scene, I think the killing part of it anyway, it's pretty brutal. Probably the best kill in my mind. But then the downside of it is like they fit that in. It's one of the pivotal important moments in the game. But there's a side to it that's important, which is there's this guy Morishige who is Mayu's like best friend from school. And Morishige's got glasses, and he's kind of seen as like a little bit weird or like studious or whatever. He's a very like serious person, and when he gets trapped in the school, he goes around taking pictures of dead bodies. And so we get like some in the game at least, we get some establishing shots where whichever character and we're wandering in, and just as we're wandering in, we hear like a flash sound and the screen brightens up for a second, and then we continue wandering in and we see this Morishige guy, and we start talking to him, and there's this, we have this kind of back and forth. It seems normal, but it's a little weird. Like every time we enter a room and then he ends up being there, there's this like flash sound and like the screen brightens up. And this keeps happening until eventually we realize that he's taking a picture of this like brutal body, and he's saying like weird stuff about it, about how like, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so whatever. He's like fascinated by this awful death in front of him. And he's like against this, he's like close to this wall, and there's a big mess in front of him, and he's taking a picture of it, and he's like obsessed with it. He's like, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm seeing this. And then in the game, so we see that happen. Then in the game, we then are playing as Kishinuma and Ayumi. We go and find Mayu, and then she gets dragged and explodes on the wall. And then from there in the game, we cut back to Morishige, and he's looking at the same corpse, and then we find out it's her. So it's like the order that we figure things out in is important because they're friends and they're close to each other, whatever, and we're slowly piecing together, slowly being shown that this Morishige guy's kind of like weird and obsessed with dead bodies, and finally we see his full obsession, flare up, and we can see that he's obsessed with this corpse's awful, disturbing sight, and then we have to, but we don't know who it is yet, and then we have the thing with Mayu, and then we have that experience, and then eventually come back to Morishige and are like, oh. Like, and then he gets the call, and it's Mayu, and she's saying, "Don't look at my insides," and it's like super disturbing. But I feel like in the movie, I don't even know. Like, you can follow that, but it's all very like we already know that that's Mayu when we see Morishige taking pictures. So in the movie, there's like no time. There's like no time to spare, like establishing shots of Morishige being weird, and then Morishige being obsessed with this corpse, and then the corpse ending up being Mayu after then we see her get killed. It's got to be like these characters go in this room, Mayu gets killed, Morishige finds the corpse, Morishige's being weird, Morishige gets a call, it's Mayu. Like, it's all very in order. And I feel like it's like a missed opportunity because it's one of the better parts of that kill in the game is the ordering of the events where we don't know yet, and then we do know, and then we're like, oh no, and then we find out from him getting called. And that's a big part. Like, the game has a lot of points where the audience or the viewer knows what's happening or is getting clues of what's happening. Ghosts do this, and they can be good or bad and whatever. And then the characters don't know, and then we get to like watch as they have to like be revealed to, and they like lose their minds, because it's so horrible. Yeah, so I think the movie, because it's so short, kind of has to rush through a lot of these areas that are maybe what makes the game special. Um, yeah, they make the game special, and there's a kind of slowness to the game that helps as well, where there's a bunch of these notes everywhere that say like how somebody died, or they say like someone's class number and their name and like a little note about them. And we get all these types of notes all throughout the school in the game, and it creates this atmosphere, this horrifying atmosphere of like all the people that could have died here and so on. Where in the movie, it's like I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if we were just the second group to come in here. Like, there's not that many dead bodies. There's not that many ghosts. There's not that many anything. It feels like much smaller scale, I guess. Mm.
But see, that's my issue with this movie is that you have all that appreciation because of the game, not
Yeah.
because the movie gave that to you.
Hmm.
And that's what hurts it for me. That's why I said earlier is that this movie was made for people who played the game and who knows the lore, even people who may have watched the short anime that they had.
Yeah.
Like, like I, but it needs to be accessible to even the people who haven't. played the game or seen
Right.
anime.
Yeah,
So
I totally agree. Uh, it's
and
yeah,
so
it's
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 just
a
like
little tragic.
something's missing. Yeah, there's something's
Yeah.
missing, and I just
Mhm.
don't. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. It's such a bummer because it's so the game is so cool. There's a lot more to it than just that. There's a ton of different scenes that are really impactful. I guess I won't overly jump into all the different scenes, but like the kids who the ghost children, whatever, where they have to get the tongues of these kids, and then the tongues allow the kids to speak and become kind of sane again, is such a cool and gradual part of the game where you meet the kids at different points and they're dangerous and they attack you and you escape, and then eventually you find the tongue. You find like one of the tongues and save one of the kids and then find the other, whatever. And in the movie, they just have to have you find the tongues in a fridge and then go and confront the kids and break the tongue thing open and give them their tongues, and that's all. But in the games, there was the tongues, but there was a doll before the tongues. So there's a doll that tells you basically where objects or where things are that are important. And the doll is super creepy and kind of loud, which attracts enemy attention. But if you follow the doll and you listen to what it says, eventually that's how they get to the tongues. And once they have the tongues, they're able to save themselves from this, because the tongues are like underneath floorboards or something crazy. Um, but but it's not all bad. Like they managed it, I think, pretty well with Sachiko. I don't know how your experience, I guess, as a non-game player, whatever, as a viewer, a movie watcher.
Now, which one was that again?
So Sachiko is the girl in the red dress. She
Yes,
is.
yes.
What was your experience with her? What's your overall takeaway?
I I wanted to know more. Like I was so intrigued from like the first scene, but again, I just felt like some punches were pulled and I was missing something.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. I think Sachiko was done better than some of the other characters, but oh, one thing is, I don't know if you noticed, there's this point, so the point where Naomi is yelling at Seiko before Seiko runs away and Naomi like passes out or whatever. As she's so within that scene, she comes out of the room, the hospital room, and sees Seiko there and goes up to her and starts yelling at her about how you should have been there, you left me all alone, I could have been killed, I was terrified, what were you thinking, whatever, I hate you. And Seiko like runs away, and then right before I think right before Naomi does that, though, there's this weird like chiming or like clicking sound in her head, and like I think she's shown for a minute in like black and white or something, and then she has this interaction. When she's doing that, like during that interaction, there is actually a girl behind her, and I didn't notice it on my first watch through, and like Sachiko is actually standing a little bit back to the left of her or whatever. And there's multiple things that are set up there. Well, no, I believe Sachiko's there. Now I got to think about it. I don't know. I know that there's that point, and there's a different point where Ayumi is wandering through the school hallway, and there's a point where Naomi's little like she's got this like purse or whatever it is that has her. It's like her ID handbook or something, and it has the slip that she needs in order to go home in it, basically. Which we don't know yet at the time, but we know that she's got the slip that was the when they tore the paper apart. She's got the slip in there, and she has a slip and then she loses it at some point here during when she trips, or that's actually, we believe that she lost it when she tripped because Seiko is like, oh, Naomi must have lost this and she cherished it or whatever, which is, I could jump into a bunch of different directions there. It was a little frustrating that we get a flashback from Seiko, who is aware that Naomi has lost her slip of paper. She has this flashback of when Naomi tripped and the paper thing like falling out of her pocket, and then instead of just letting the audience be aware that like, oh, she lost this thing, Seiko's gonna go get it, and she gets up and leaves, she has to say something like, I need to go get that, I need to go get her handbook. It has something in it that Naomi cherishes most, which is like, can you like just let me follow what's happening? Like in those cases, like they under-explain almost all the time, except for sometimes they've got to say it right on the nose, say exactly what they're going to do, which seems bizarre. But anyway, Seiko goes and gets the notebook. She comes back, and when she comes back, that's when Naomi freaks out on her. There's a time a little while later where Ayumi and Kishinuma, I guess, are wandering through the hallway, where Ayumi finds and picks up Naomi's handbook, which has her slip of paper in it, which is how ultimately she switches out the paper for a different one. I don't know if you remember that part. But she switches out Naomi's paper, which is so stupid, but it's fine. Anyway, so
I do remember it, but
yeah,
I was trying to
yeah.
figure out like, what exactly was that
Mhm.
supposed to do.
Right, yeah, because I don't think they explained it at all. So the pieces of paper, I mean, like, you probably know now maybe, but the pieces of paper, you need to have all of that. Like, you need to have either your own or at least someone's who was within the chanting circle, the Sachiko Ever After charm that sent them all there in order to, like, reverse the charm and escape. And Ayumi is, there's a sort of, what is a love triangle going on where Ayumi and Naomi both like Satoshi, who is according to the games, is the main character. I really think of Naomi as being the main character because there's at least a little bit more connection. Because there's so many characters, I think of it like there's Naomi and she has this best friend Seiko, and she has a crush Satoshi, and then she has like a rival for that crush Ayumi, and then her rival for that crush Ayumi has someone who's a crush on her, which is Kishinuma, Yoshiki Kishinuma, whatever. And there's more Shige and Mayu who are kind of like classmates, and they're a little bit they're the only ones that aren't really a part of this whole weird triangle thing going on. And then the last person is Satoshi's little sister Yuka, which is just yeah, so many people to keep track of. But anyway, so Ayumi finds Naomi's notebook or handbook, whatever, that has her paper in it. She finds it, and I'm pretty sure there's a shot where we see Sachiko, who is the little girl in red, having like basically she puts that notebook down, but it happens in the background of a shot, so you don't really it's not really focused on her. And then Ayumi turns around after a little bit. I'm pretty sure Ayumi wants to go and figure out a way out of here on her own. Kishinuma is like it's this stuff isn't your fault. I'm gonna go with you. We'll get it done together, and it's better to have a friend in here than not. And Ayumi like goes along with it and turns back and looks at him, and then sees the notebook and goes and picks up the notebook. Kishinuma asks her, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Oh, nothing, whatever." And then and this kind of allows for later on Ayumi to switch out Naomi's piece of paper for a different piece of paper, which yeah, I don't know if they even knew at that time in the movie that the pieces of paper allow you to escape. Maybe they did. I really don't remember for sure. I think they might because ultimately Ayumi and Kishinuma and then as their group and then Satoshi and Naomi, which Ayumi and Naomi are weirdly similar names to say. I'm just realizing now. But anyway, so you got these two groups, and they all meet up together at one point, and that's when they watch that tape of the paranormal investigator, just another person to add to the list, who tells them that the reverse charm and the way that it works, but then also that the reverse charm won't work, or that they should try to like find um, a way to figure out stuff with Sachiko, or Sachiko, yeah. If they're going to get out of here, they can't just leave probably. But mm, or that he doesn't have. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so it's all hard to follow a little bit, but the really hard to follow really. Even as someone who like played the games, whatever. The paranormal investigator that they watch a tape of at one point, who tells them about or who they figure out that there's a reversal charm from. That guy can't do the reversal charm because you need to have at least two people to get out of this plane, this dimension, whatever it is. But then later on, Ayumi and Kishinuma find the cursed children, break the thing to give them their tongues, and the cursed children tell them they're going to have to find a way to have Sachiko rest or like allow her to move on, or else they'll never get out of here. It's not going to matter if they do the charm anyway. And so that's why they feel that's why ultimately that we get pushed down that direction of having to solve that rather than just getting together and getting the heck out of there. But with that in mind, it's weird. It like I think Ayumi must have swapped out Naomi's piece of paper because she's jealous, whatever. But I'm thinking it must have been as an influence from the school. I really have to kind of hope so because that's such like a demented thing to do. Um, and ultimately, like I don't know if did you follow why the ending happened the way that it did? It did with two people alive and one person dead.
No, I did not.
So
I feel like there's so much of
yeah.
this movie that just went over my head.
Oh, it's all. I mean, it's all. It's totally understandable, but it's so, and it's really a cool ending. The game. the game obviously does it the best, and it's not the only ending, so there's other ways you can get out of it. But it's to me, it's the best ending, even though it's probably like the worst ending in terms of getting most people killed, but still beating the game. But in this ending, and the anime does a much better job of I think showing this. The idea is Ayumi swaps out Naomi's piece of paper for a just regular piece of paper that has nothing to do with a charm. You can only escape by using the charm, and there's this moment in the movie where Satoshi, who is like Naomi's crush, both of their crushes, whatever, Satoshi has his slip of paper and I think her slip of paper and swaps them around or says, I'll hold on to yours or something along these lines. And ultimately, like at the end of the movie, they all hold hands and they have their charms, but Satoshi has her charm because Satoshi earlier on in the movie, when Ayumi swaps out the pieces of paper, notices and thinks it's odd but isn't sure. And then later on, basically, so they're all holding hands. He's the only one with the wrong slip of paper. He gives Oh yeah, Naomi loses her paper anyway or something, or I think he loses his paper and has hers, and then he's going to use Mayu's paper, but he says she can use Mayu's paper instead of him since he can use her paper. But the paper of hers that he's using is a fake paper, so it's a whole thing. But or not Mayu, but Yuka? No, it is. I forget if it's Mayu or Yuka, but someone's piece of paper. So there's Ayumi who has her own piece of paper still. There's Naomi who has whatever paper Satoshi gave her, which is one of the ones that still works, either his or his sister's or somebody's. And then there's Satoshi himself who has the fake piece of paper and he knows it or he believes that's probably true because he knows Ayumi swapped them out. But now there's no more piece of paper left to get because everyone else is dead and they got to get out of there. And so when they teleport back to the real world, they bring along both the girls and Satoshi. Basically, they pulled his arms through into the real world, but because he didn't have a piece of paper, he's left in this hellhole or whatever. It's crazy. It's kind of nuts, but it's a cool ending in the game. It's a cool ending in the anime, and then in the movie, it's just clearly doesn't really come across why that all happened.
Yeah, I just feel like it's another instance of them speed running and then slowing down and
Mhm.
then things just not being explained
Yeah.
because it's not until those paper switching scenes where I'm just like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
this piece of paper is actually really important, but
Right.
they did a piss poor job in explaining it. And then
Hmm.
I don't know, I kind of hate a movie. I don't like horror movies when
Hmm.
a quote unquote like bad person wins.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because like she shouldn't have been there. She should have been stuck. There should have been some
Yeah.
type of like consequence of like
Hmm.
we're
It's
gonna let
pretty
him
lame.
through. We're gonna let him through because he was a good person, and we're gonna keep you because you intentionally did
Yeah.
this. That's
But
what
it's
I was
tough.
kind of expecting.
Yeah. It's a tough thing, I think. I guess from the games and everything. Like, so there is like the darkening, which is a major thing, which they didn't even talk about or explain or reference at all in the movie. But they did reference it in that Naomi kills Seiko. So Naomi kills Seiko. How that kind of comes about is Naomi's yelling at Seiko, which is like her friend character, whatever. And then she has the darkening affect her, and we get to see Seiko run away, but then Naomi passes out, and later on she wakes up, and then she looks around for Seiko, and she finds her in the bathroom, or she goes into the bathroom, and then she opens a stall, and Seiko's in there, hung from the neck. And so Naomi's like horribly disturbed by this and is like, oh no, like this place is horrible. She screams and it's this awful event. But later on, we get to see this. There's like a tape because the paranormal investigator guy that we get we get to see a tape from who explains the reversal charm. That guy also set up a bunch of cameras throughout the school, and so one of the cameras captured that Naomi was actually that she hung Seiko. And Naomi can't remember this happening, and she's not aware of any of it, but it did happen. And it's an extension of her, like, I guess there's a part of people, like, it's sort of the idea that everybody has this good and evil inside them or whatever. And so people who have evil inside them, it's like the school can find that and then use that to do horrible things. That's also, I think, the idea for Morishige, the guy that, like, he takes a bunch of pictures of corpses and then later on he chases Yuka, Satoshi's younger sister, around until she finds Sachiko, who then takes her off wherever. And Morishige is the guy that gets his head bashed in with like a sledgehammer or something from the janitor, who just keeps hitting over and over and over and over and over again, while Mayu is sitting behind like a table or something. Or not Mayu, but Yuka. The two of them, anyway. They have like the Yuka and Mayu are these like those two characters in the game were even hard to differentiate because they have like almost the exact same character models. But that doesn't matter anyway. So yeah, um, I think Sachiko. I hope that Sachiko was done well enough that like you're aware of Sachiko. That Sachiko was like this little girl and that her mom got pushed down the stairs or chased down the stairs by the principal or some like a guy, but it was the principal. So Sachiko's mom falls down the stairs after trying to like get away from the principal, from in like a flashback that we get to see, and Sachiko's mom, her head hits the floor when she trips down the stairs. Her head hits the floor and she's like bleeding out from her head. And the principal comes down and says something along the lines of, like you shouldn't have tried to like run. You're stupid. You shouldn't have tried to run. Something like that. And then Sachiko is there, and the principal looks over and sees Sachiko there, and then the principal comes over and basically chokes her to death. And that's kind of like the setup for Sachiko as a ghost, as like the reason why she's so demented is like that's like the start of it or a part of it is that the principal killed her mom, saw that she was there, and then killed her too so that there'd be no witnesses. And then from there, the principal hides her body and the mom's body, I believe, in the basement. So there's two graves down there, at least in the game, and I think in the movie it's maybe one grave. But regardless, in the game anyway, the principal takes their bodies, hides them in the basement, and then I believe there's a shot in the movie where we see in this basement that we keep hearing over and over again Sachiko is saying something over and over, and the principal is like frustrated about it and is yelling about it, and the janitor's in the room as well, and he's kind of cowering in the corner. He's the guy that ultimately ends up being that ghoul that kills a bunch of people in the movie. And yeah, so the janitor, sorry, yeah, the janitor's hiding or cowering in the room. The principal tells the janitor to do something about the noise, cut out her tongue, something, and the janitor is too afraid and stays like there cowering in fear. And so the principal goes and digs up Sachiko and cuts out her tongue and stabs her in the chest with scissors. As a corpse, her corpse in the chest with scissors. And so like that's one scene that we get to see, but it's not the only like flashback we get to see from like touching someone or like from some past rush of experience that we get to find out about. So that's like the establishment of Sachiko and who's like why Sachiko is the way that she is in part. And then from that happening, we get another scene in the movie where Sachiko basically it's a lot better done in the games, but it's fine. In the movie, I'm pretty sure it's Ayumi. One of the ghost children shows her a vision, and in this vision, Ayumi is as the kid. She's laying on the ground, and her hands are bound behind her back, whatever. And there's another kid next to her, and then we see initially the janitor, but then it isn't, and then we look away and we look back, and it's not the janitor anymore. It's Sachiko, and it's Sachiko's ghost, and Sachiko's ghost is cutting out the tongues of these kids and stabbing them, and so there's some type of twist there where. And early on, we get to see the horror of what Sachiko experienced, but then later on, we get introduced to the horror of what Sachiko becomes because of that experience as a ghost. And this is ultimately like we're supposed to sort of feel for Sachiko that all this happened to her, but also like she needs to be purified, and that does happen at the end of the movie. It's all way too much of a rush, but it does happen. And so I think you've probably followed this part at least. I don't know. I don't know. Does some of that sound familiar, or does that some were you picking up on some of that, or was it just too rushed?
Yeah, that was actually pretty easy to
Okay.
get from the movie itself.
I thought so too. Yeah, I thought that part was the best handled. That part of Sachiko following that story of little girl and the principal, and I think that part was pretty
Yeah,
well
I
handled, and all of that's in the last half.
the little girl in the principal that broke me, especially like when he chokes her.
Hmm.
I was not
Yeah,
prepared for that.
yeah, it was pretty brutal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that part was pretty well handled, and all of that's in the last half. And this is kind of why, like, because I think that starts somewhat early in the second half. Is
Hmm.
that experience where she gets choked, and then the ending is with, or like towards the ending, probably that must happen before then we get the later vision of that she's actually the one who's committing the horrible acts, and that's at this, and we get that vision I think right after she leads Yuka, the main character, or like the guy's younger sister, into a room. So she leads Yuka into a room in order to escape Morishige slash like the janitor, this battle that's happening there, or really the janitor just slaughtering Morishige over, like, and just hammering over him. But she leads Yuka into a room and she acts like she's innocent, and then we cut back to Ayumi and Kishinuma as they battle the ghost children. The ghost children show her the vision of what, like, the real, the real killer or whatever you could say, as being Sachiko. And then back to Sachiko we go, and Sachiko, I think, lures or forces, maybe has the janitor force Mayu, like straps her to a bed or something like that, and then like stabs her in the chest with an umbrella, her older brother's umbrella, I think it is. And like all of these kind of, like, these felt a little better. The pacing seemed more normal. I think earlier setup would have probably led into this better, so we're fully aware of everything going on. But like that whole part felt pretty decent. And like at least, and this is kind of why, like, I think for people who liked the game, I think it's worth it to take a look, because you do, like, this is at least a satisfying way to portray that situation in a movie. Um, and also the ending killing, like, so Yuka, after escaping, or I don't know, being rescued from this whole situation where she's got an umbrella poked into her side. She's got like this. She's bleeding from the side a bunch. And I'm pretty sure her tongue is cut out at this point. I don't remember for sure, but in the game it was, and I think in the movie it was. So she's like really dying, but she's still alive, and
Yeah,
Satoshi is
her
still
tongue was
hoping to get her
gone.
out. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. It's so brutal, but it's kind of awesome, like that whole situation, because I'm pretty sure in the game, and here's like a tough thing is in the game, things are kind of handled differently with Yuka. Like there's a point where Yuka and Satoshi, her older brother, where they get separated, and Yuka is kind of wandering around, and she doesn't know where to go, whatever. And in my memory, it was Morishige, but it might have been some other ghost guy or some other guy that was trapped there. But there's a guy that like leads her around, and there's a point I'm pretty sure where she trusts Morishige because Morishige like seems normal. The guy that saw the girl's like corpse or whatever, and took pictures and got the call saying don't look at my inside. That whole situation. In the movie, the minute that she sees Morishige, the minute she sees that guy, his face is like covered in blood for some reason. I don't really remember why. I don't know why he would, but his face is covered in blood, and he's acting super strange. And she immediately runs away from him. And then very shortly after, he gets killed by the janitor, where we get a lot longer of her wandering. I think wandering around with him, and like we're kind of more aware of that we know he's a threat, but we know that she doesn't know he's a threat. That he's gone crazy, and let's see where I was going. But let's see. Yuka. Oh, and then Yuka having her tongue cut out. We get a while there, I'm pretty sure, where she's being chased around, but she doesn't have a tongue, and so she can't speak and she can't do anything about it. Where in the movie we don't really get that, which is a bit of a bummer. Again, like we have to rush past some of these cooler scenes. But we do get this different ending where Satoshi, our like main guy character, in the game, he's sort of the only pure one, pretty much. Like he doesn't really, the darkening doesn't, I don't think, ever really impact him very much because he doesn't have a lot of these violent tendencies that some of the other people can have, and therefore are like more impacted by within the school. And so it was kind of cool to see in the movie. So they're trying to get Sachiko to rest or whatever, but she's sort of refusing to, and or there's some reason why it's not happening, and Satoshi's scared and upset, and his sister is like in this horrible state, and so I'm pretty sure something happens where Satoshi like tackles Sachiko and like grabs a brick and starts like bashing her head in to try to, like, I guess, to try to find a way to like just make her settle, because she's like a threat, whatever. And then as he's doing this, people are trying to pull him off of her, but he just keeps going. And then finally they pull him off, and it ends up being that he actually bashed his sister's head in. And it's so, oh, it did, that's not in the game. Like that actually was, I wish the movie were better overall because that was actually pretty cool that they had that whole sequence. I mean, it's really brutal, um, but it was pretty cool. I don't know, like I don't know what you thought of that, but yeah, I really wasn't expecting it at all.
That was intense.
Yeah.
I see
Mhm.
that moment in the other in like a couple other moments came too late for me. Like it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
it's the kind of thing that I needed in the middle or a little bit at the beginning. It's just like uh,
Yeah.
I
The
wasn't
quality of it
expecting
is
him
crazy.
to. Yeah, I wasn't expecting him to like attack or anything. And
Mhm.
hearing you explain the differences of the character from the video game, it's such like a drastic like
Mhm.
turn
Yeah.
that I feel like again I would appreciate or would have stuck out more to me if I played the video game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's honestly it's frustrating for sure. Like, yeah, the game is really good, and the first half of the movie, I think I was able to maybe survive it better because the first half I was just like cracking up, like I can't believe what I'm watching because I played the game or I saw the games enough that I'm like, this is insane. I can't believe they're doing this. And then the last half is like it's such a switch up that then I'm like, okay, and I'm like, okay, now we just kind of forget what we saw before and see what we can think of this, and then we think about it as a whole. But you can't really do that if the before is all of the establishing for the entire setup. Like, if you've already played the game or seen the game, you could just watch the last half of the movie as a standalone and be like, oh, it's a little sloppy, but it's nice. But if you haven't, then the last half of the movie is like, what's going on? Like, where am I? What's happening? And the first half doesn't do a good enough job of establishing to get to the last half. So that's kind of the bummer. Is like that's why I think someone who played or watched the game or whatever would probably enjoy it quite a lot more. Um, I do think, hmm, I think I like it's unfortunate. Also, I think the effects for the movie also improved as it went along, and I really don't understand why that happened either. Like I don't know how this movie exists. Like it makes me think that they did the last half of the movie first and spent more of the budget there and more of the time and more of the focus, and then we're like, okay, we have to fit the rest of it into this first like 30 minutes or something. We just have to throw all the rest of it in there. It's going to have to fit. So we have to establish all these things as fast as like that's how it feels like it has to have happened because like there was a point where I watched the beginning part and I'm just like I can't believe this is happening. And then I see like I think there's this bucket that's like full of like it's got a human hand sticking out of it. It's full of guts and whatever. And I'm looking at the surroundings and I'm like, okay, this is like the beginning here is almost laughably bad, admittedly. Um, but also they did so much work on the set. Like, how is this so high quality? Like, what? How is this possible that this is so high quality and they're willing to spend money there and time there, but they're not here? And then things started picking up, and I was like, oh no, it actually isn't as bad as I thought. And then eventually, towards the end, I was like, oh my gosh, this happened. I really wasn't expecting that. That's awesome. But then I'm sort of writing away the beginning because the beginning is just really horrible. Yeah, probably my overall takeaway. Mhm.
I just feel like they didn't give the they didn't give each individual character enough time to really come through. I felt like we were given moments with characters in either solo or duo scenes, but then they also died in those scenes.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like for me, I could tell right away who the main focus were because the three characters that were ultimately left with at the end are the ones they really focused on a lot.
Mhm. Yeah,
But it's like you want me to care about these characters, yes, they're just part of the body count, but you can still make me feel something. You can
yeah. That's
still
the
like have me
right.
drawn to that character.
Yeah, yeah. The game, obviously, being 10 hours, whatever. Like there were characters I felt that way about in the game, but that was because those characters only got like 10, 20 minutes of like their own section. But that's so much more. Like that. Like if every character that was like a side character that were like, I would have loved seeing more of this character, only got 10 or 20 minutes in this movie. There's eight main characters that you just wouldn't be possible, and that's why like unless they made a longer movie or split it into multiple, which is I'm really confused on what the heck is going to happen. Being that there is a sequel to this, like I know it's probably going to be based off of like later games, but I don't know how they're going to pull it off, and I'm really ah yeah, I really have no idea what the heck's going to happen, and how this got greenlit for another movie as well is a little crazy to me. I mean, the game was popular, and I guess maybe the movie did well enough for that, but also after only 1 year later, like what is even going to happen there, considering what happened here? I mean, I guess I'm hopeful. It'd be cool. It'd be cool if they figured out something from what they did here and really kind of carried it away into something different there. But one can only hope. Mm.
Do you have any more thoughts overall?
Nothing that's not going to be sort of going over the same things again. Like there's a point where I think there's a major shift in the movie. There's a specific point where I think the movie goes from being really bad to being okay slash good, which is during the sequence where Naomi is like trapped in that room in the hospital bed. Before that, everything that happens is unbelievably rushed, and we haven't established any characters. And then after that point, where like it's as if we had like an extra half an hour before that where we established all the characters, I almost feel like after that point would have been overall a really pretty good movie. And that's like I feel like that's really the crux of it is like there's just so much packed into such a tiny space. And like there's I was a particular example, maybe most egregiously bad, is there's a the character Morishige that I mentioned a few times, the guy with the glasses. Morishige's name is Morishige Sakutaro. And there's points where he's called Morishige, and then there's points where he's called Sakutaro. But these points are generally not when he's in the room. So if people are talking about some situation and they say his name either is first or they say just his last name. And there's a point after a little while into it where, like, if we had been really established with these characters and all their nicknames and names and whatever, then it wouldn't bother me. But there's a point a little bit further in the point where they're watching like the recording of the investigator, the paranormal investigator guy, and getting the reversal charm thing. We're learning about that, where one of them just says, like, I need to go find Shige. And it's, I think on rewatch, I was like more aware really that like, we don't know who the heck that guy is. We don't know. We don't like it's, and that's, yeah, I think that's just, it's so painful. Like that part is particularly painful. I'm really hoping a next movie will fix that end, because I really liked the ending of this movie quite a bit, as a fan, I guess. Hmm.
Well, since we're talking about the next movie, I hope we that we pick up where we left off,
Hmm.
because I feel like we need to know what happens with those two characters afterwards. Like they just survived all of this, and our main male character is left behind because of the actions of one of them, and I want to see that. I'm gonna be
Hmm.
so pissed if it's a whole new cast of characters, a whole new there's not even a direct connection with this movie, because I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
you
I
see
need
that,
to see.
right?
Yeah, so like
You see that
I
too
hate when a
often. Yeah.
movie just yes they just do that. They just like they just pick up. They either pick up with a whole new friend group or they pick up with a
Hmm.
whole new just set of characters, and you just don't. I like to see like the direct and like what directly like the
Hmm.
direct impact of the previous movie. I hate when sequels just like jump to the next.
Right. Yeah. 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 Honestly, I wouldn't be horribly against just getting a more fleshed out like experience of the school and what's going on there and things like that. But yeah, you definitely need. There's so much more. There's just more of this. Flesh it
I
out,
mean,
figure it
I
out.
would
Yeah, I
be
agree.
okay with a prequel
True. Yeah. Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
principal and all that. Like that. Like I want to see what like how this place came to be in general. Like if you just give me that fully
Right.
fleshed out, it'll make
Yeah.
up for some things.
Mhm. Yeah. Just delve deeper. Just some way to make it more fleshed out, because it's just that, yeah, the timing for this first one, and whether or not they'll have more time in the second one, or like how they're going to organize that. Yeah, I'm definitely really curious. Honestly, there's been points like after watching this movie and watching it again, there's been points where I've been tempted, like, I want to see what happens. Like, I think if I see what happens, it's going to kind of spoil me and I'm going to mix things up a lot more potentially and whatever. So I got to wait. But I am excited for this next one. Even though I think the
I am
first
as
one,
well.
had problems. But yeah, yeah.
This one definitely had a problem. I'm trying to understand why it was greenlit for a sequel, but I can probably see that this movie probably made a lot of money, mostly because the game was successful, the anime was probably successful,
Mhm.
so seeing it live action in theaters,
Yeah.
people probably flock to go
Right.
see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that mean it was good? No, it's just like we get to see something that we love live action on the big
Mhm.
screen, so that brings in
Right,
money.
right, right,
But hopefully they use that money and put it to use for the sequel
right.
because like I don't know. I hope it's slowed down a bit. That again, there are parts of this movie that need to be slowed
Mhm.
down. And it would have been amazing
Right.
for me.
Yeah. Yep, yep.
Because I feel like when we what was the last movie the first game that
Detention was the
we
first one.
the first movie. Yes, I feel like that explained things
Right.
so well because it had a
Yeah.
lot to
True.
do. It wasn't just
Mhm.
explaining introducing us to the characters and their
Yeah.
story. It was also explaining to us how things
Mhm.
were and the culture at that
Right.
time. And I felt like everything was greatly
Mhm.
explained.
Yeah, that one
And I just feel like this
it's a
movie
little
didn't
tough,
do
I think, because with detention, we took a look at the game some beforehand, so it at least you have some establishment there of like kind of who's who. But
yes.
still, yeah, detention did have a ton of characters to balance, and I think they did do a way better job of that. They also, I think detention was around like a 3 or 3.5 hour long game, and so the amount they were trying to fit into it was less. Um, and so that probably helped though. Like I don't see why it's a common thing is like they try to fit an entire story into like one movie and they cut out a ton of stuff just so you can have the beginning because people like the beginning and have the end because people like the end and then have some establishment somewhere in the middle there. But it's like I feel like a trilogy even would be justified. This is a pretty big franchise. Like I don't see why they almost couldn't. Like if you think about I don't know. When you think about like Lord of the Rings or something, or like Lord of the Rings. Well, I mean, I don't want to go into rant into Lord of the Rings because The Hobbit and like the fact that there were three movies about a tiny little book, and then there were three movies about like these much bigger books, one per book, is bizarre. But more just to say, like you can if a story is successful enough and people will want to see it, you can just do three movies or two movies or whatever for one story and cut off somewhere in the middle, and people probably would love it. Honestly, like this could have been. Um, this could have been like a cherished kind of movie if it just take all this budget, dedicate it to the first half of the story, and flesh it out way more, and it would be so cool because there's like aspects of the game. Maybe the biggest aspect of the game, I guess, because I know we're kind of getting maybe towards the end here. The biggest aspect of the game that I've neglected to talk about um, is that the most important difference, whatever, is that in the game, when they're dropped into different sort of mini like pocket dimensions. And we figure this out as we go along. And it's so super important to the core of the game because within each of these different areas, like time isn't really linear. All kinds of crazy stuff happens. Like we can find a body of someone who later on dies. Like we find a body with one group and then or yeah, find a body with one group and then later on find the person that it belonged to alive. And there's just weird time stuff that goes on that's really satisfying. There's also like as a viewer or a game player or whatever, there's elements where you're waiting for two different people to run into each other, and they just keep getting close and close and close and almost running into each other until finally they walk into the same room, and they're not both in the same place because they're not in the same dimension. Because the idea is there's been so many kids that have been brought down into this school that it's like shattered this like whatever reality, and it's a whole mess. And the more that it goes, and the longer this is allowed to keep happening, the harder it will be to close all these dimensions, right? To let Sachiko rest because there's all these kids in this one and kids in that one and maybe slaughtered adults in this one or whatever like all these different pockets have their own sets of characters that are dead and are suffering or are like tortured souls or whatever. And ultimately, if you can get through them in all these different areas, you can get to Sachiko and repair things. But if you can't do it, the dimensions will keep getting fractured. And that's like that side of it is really 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 cool. And I would have not have at all expected. I don't know what I expected. When I went into it, the fact that they were all together was a bit of a bummer to me because it meant that's not possible. They're not going to go that way. But also thinking about it, I don't know if you could have pulled that off, but like the game is so much deeper than the movie that like you could have at least split it into two, and you wouldn't even get close to the amount of content, the amount of what you could make, and you would have like plenty to work with, so much to work with, so many like reading this note from this kid, seeing this person kill that person, the different kids, whatever. Like there's so many characters. They used a lot of characters here, but there are more. And so yeah, it's to see it all crammed into one movie is so sad. I do think for the second movie, if it's going to go the route that I think it's going to go, that there's potential for it to be substantially better. Because there is a second game, and if it's based off of that game, I think it'd be a lot easier to work with and fix some of the problems of the first. Like I'm really hoping, because the first, it's crazy what they went for here.
Well, do you have any
I mean,
final
that's
thoughts?
probably it. Like frustration, but also, I liked the ending. Yeah, optimism
Optimism.
for the next one for sure.
Well, I also have some optimism for the next one. I'm hoping it's more fleshed out. I'm hoping it's more together, a little bit more slower. There's more character building and character interest. So I am waiting to see what awaits us. But before we hang it up, it's time for us to see if we cash or pass Corpse Party. Deadeye?
It hurts to say, but I think pass. I think I'd have to say pass here.
I would have to say pass as well. Mostly because I think if I feel like if I can't enjoy the movie for just being a movie and I need extra context to enjoy it, then it's a pass. I have to be able to enjoy the movie on its own merit and not have to do any extra homework
Agree.
to see it to enjoy it.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately,
it's a pass
yeah.
for me as well.
Mm.
Well, join Deadeye and I when we get together to review Corpse Party 2. I believe
Yep,
it has the
sounds right.
subtitle of The Book of Shadows. Sounds witchy. So,
We'll see.
maybe it's better.
If you like this episode, please check out the Haddonfield Horror podcast from big series like Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Saw, or our one-off reviews like The Blackening and Hereditary. You can follow Haddonfield Horrors on Instagram and TikTok, where the hosts post updates and mini-reviews. Full episodes are available on several podcasting platforms and YouTube. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. The Haddonfield Horror podcast is produced by Mark Smart,
Maria Perez,
Twan Griffin, and Elian Cordova. Themed by Lethal Injection and edited by Mark Smart.
The Haddonfield Horrors podcast is a Letters to Media production.
Should we do an intro?